My name is Margaret Hayes. 3 years ago, if someone had told me my own son would lock me out on Christmas Eve, I would have laughed and called them crazy. But life has a way of turning impossible things into memories. That December evening was colder than usual in northern Colorado. Snow covered the sidewalks. Christmas lights sparkled from every porch, and families gathered inside warm homes sharing food, laughter, and stories. I stood outside my son Ethan's house carrying a homemade pecan pie and a small wooden box wrapped in red paper. Inside that box was something special. A gift I had saved for more than 20 years. A gift that belonged to his childhood. I had spent weeks preparing for that visit. I imagined Ethan opening the door, smiling, maybe even hugging me. I imagined hearing my grandchildren call me Grandma. Instead, the moment I stepped onto the porch, I noticed something strange. The curtains moved. Someone inside saw me, but nobody came to the door. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then I heard laughter. Not the laughter of happy people. The laughter of people watching something amusing. My stomach tightened. Finally, the door opened. Not by Ethan. By his wife, Vanessa. She looked me up and down like I was an unexpected delivery. "Oh," she said. "It's you." Not hello. Not Merry Christmas. Just, "It's you." I forced a smile. "I brought dessert." Vanessa glanced at the pie. "We already have dessert." I looked past her shoulder. The dining room was full of guests. Crystal glasses. Designer clothes. Perfect decorations. The kind of Christmas people post online to make strangers jealous. Then Ethan appeared. For a second, I thought everything would be okay. For a second. His expression changed the moment he saw me. "Mom," he sighed. "What are you doing here?" The question hit harder than the cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's Christmas Eve." Vanessa folded her arms. "Ethan told you we were hosting clients this year?" Clients. Not family, clients. I felt my fingers tighten around the pie dish. I thought maybe there would still be room for me. The silence that followed said everything. Then Ethan stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind him. Keeping me on the porch. Keeping me outside. Like I was the problem. Like I didn't belong. "Mom," he said. "You should have called first." I stared at him. "I'm your mother." His eyes shifted away. For some reason, he couldn't look directly at me. And that's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They never expected me to be there. Because they never wanted me there. Snowflakes landed on the wrapped gift in my hands. Slowly melting. Just like the last bit of hope I had brought with me. Then Ethan said something I will never forget. Something that changed everything. Something that made me realize the son I raised might already be gone. And when he finally spoke those words, the small wooden box slipped from my hands and crashed onto the porch. But what Ethan didn't know? The old wooden box lying at our feet contained a secret his late father had hidden for over 20 years. A secret that could change who truly owned everything he valued. And before Christmas was over, that secret would destroy the life Ethan thought belonged to him. The wooden box hit the porch with a sharp crack. For a moment, neither of us moved. Snow drifted between us in the silence. Ethan glanced down at it, then back at me. "What is that?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Something your father wanted you to have." His jaw tightened immediately. "Dad's been gone for 20 years. That doesn't change what he wanted." Vanessa opened the front door just enough to listen. I could feel her watching, judging, waiting. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Mom, not tonight. Not tonight." Funny how people always say that when the truth is inconvenient. I bent down slowly and picked up the box. The wood was scratched now, damaged, just like the relationship standing in front of me. "I drove 2 hours through a snowstorm to see you," I said quietly. "You could at least invite me inside for 5 minutes." Ethan looked toward the warm glow behind the door. Then back at me. His answer came without hesitation. "We have important people here." The words settled between us. Important people. I nodded slowly. "I understand." And I did. More than he realized. Because this wasn't the first time Ethan had been embarrassed by me. It started years ago. Back when he was 12. Back when we lived in a small rented house after his father died. Money was tight. Sometimes painfully tight. I worked 2 jobs. Cleaning offices during the day. Helping at a diner during weekends. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. Every sacrifice mattered. But children don't always see sacrifice. Sometimes they only see what they're missing. One afternoon, I arrived at Ethan's middle school still wearing my cleaning uniform. I had rushed straight from work because he forgot his lunch. I remember smiling when I saw him near the football field. "Ethan," I called. His friends turned. So did he. And I'll never forget what happened next. The look on his face. Not happiness. Not relief. Embarrassment. Pure embarrassment. One boy laughed. Your mom's the janitor? Another smirked. Man, that's rough. I watched Ethan's cheeks turn red. For a moment, I expected him to defend me. Instead, he grabbed the lunch bag and muttered, "You didn't have to come." Then he walked away, leaving me standing there, holding the shame he didn't want. That night, he barely spoke. And when he finally did, the words cut deeper than he knew. Why can't you have a normal job? I remember staring at him across our tiny kitchen table. Because I wanted to tell him something. I wanted to tell him there was nothing shameful about honest work. That dignity doesn't come from a paycheck. That character matters more than status. But he was only 12. And 12-year-olds don't always understand those things. So I simply smiled. And kept working. The years passed. The distance grew. Every promotion Ethan earned seemed to push him farther away. College. Corporate jobs. Luxury cars. Country club memberships. New friends. New circles. People who measured worth by neighborhoods and income. People who believed kindness was weakness. And eventually, people like Vanessa. Vanessa had grown up wealthy. The kind of wealthy where problems were solved with money before they became problems. The first time I met her, she smiled politely. But her eyes told a different story. The way she looked at my clothes, my car, my house. Everything about me felt like a disappointment she was trying not to mention. Over the years, she stopped trying. Little comments became normal. Tiny insults disguised as jokes. Backhanded compliments, carefully chosen words designed to remind me where I stood. Or where she believed I stood. And Ethan, he never stopped her. Not once. At first, I told myself he didn't notice. Then I realized the truth. He noticed. He just agreed. The realization broke something inside me. Not all at once. Slowly, year after year, holiday after holiday, missed phone call after missed phone call. Until eventually, I became someone he visited out of obligation instead of love. Standing on that porch, I finally saw the full picture. The embarrassed 12-year-old had never disappeared. He had simply grown older, and richer, and crueler. A burst of laughter erupted from inside the house. Someone called Ethan's name. He looked over his shoulder, anxious to get back, anxious to leave me standing outside. Then Vanessa stepped onto the porch. Her smile looked sweet. Her words didn't. "Ethan, your guests are asking where you are." Then she looked directly at me. "And honestly, Margaret, this isn't really the kind of party you'd enjoy." I met her eyes. "No?" She smiled wider. "We're discussing investments, business acquisitions, luxury travel." Her gaze dropped briefly to my worn winter coat. "You probably wouldn't have much to contribute." The insult landed exactly where she intended. But for the first time, something inside me refused to bend. I looked at Ethan, waiting, hoping, giving him one final chance, one final opportunity to remember who he was, who his father raised him to be. But Ethan only sighed. And that's when I understood. He had already made his choice. The question was, had I finally made mine? As I turned away from the porch, clutching the wooden box against my chest, I heard Vanessa say something she thought I couldn't hear. Something about my late husband. Something so shocking that I stopped walking instantly. Because the secret hidden inside that wooden box suddenly wasn't the most dangerous secret anymore. I had almost reached the end of the walkway when I heard Vanessa laugh. Not a joyful laugh. The kind people use when they think they've already won. I wasn't trying to listen. But some words have a way of finding you, especially the ones meant to hurt. "Honestly," she said to someone near the doorway, "if Richard had made better choices, none of this would have happened." My feet stopped. Richard. My husband. Ethan's father. The man who had been dead for 20 years. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Then another voice asked, "What do you mean?" Vanessa lowered her voice. But not enough. My mother always said he wasted his potential. A few people chuckled. He could have been successful if he hadn't spent his life rescuing people. The words hit like ice water. Rescuing people. That was exactly who Richard had been. A man who couldn't walk past suffering without trying to help. A man who believed kindness wasn't weakness. A man who spent his life proving it. I slowly turned around. The porch lights reflected off the snow. Vanessa hadn't noticed I was still there. Neither had Ethan. They were too busy entertaining their guests. Too busy rewriting history. For a long moment, I simply stood there, listening, watching, remembering. Because the truth was, Richard wasn't poor because he failed. Richard was poor because he gave. When our neighbor lost her husband, he paid her heating bill. When a teenager needed school supplies, he bought them. When families struggled, he found a way to help. Not because he wanted praise, because he believed it was the right thing to do. The world calls people like that foolish. Richard called it being human. And I loved him for it. My fingers tightened around the wooden box. The box Ethan had refused to take. The box his father had prepared years before his death. A box I hadn't opened since the day Richard gave it to me. I remember that day clearly. It was late autumn. The leaves were turning gold. Richard sat at our kitchen table carefully wrapping the box in brown paper. "What is it?" I asked. He smiled. "A surprise." "For who?" "For Ethan." I laughed. "Then why not give it to him now?" His expression changed slightly. Not sad, thoughtful. If the day ever comes when he forgets what's important. He rested his hand on the box. "Give him this." I remember rolling my eyes. "That's oddly specific." Richard laughed. "Trust me." Then he looked out the window. Quiet. Reflective. Almost like he could see something I couldn't. "If he ever starts measuring people by money," he paused. "If he ever forgets where he came from," another pause. "Promise me you'll give him this." I promised. At the time it seemed unnecessary. Impossible even. Our little boy adored his father. How could he ever forget the values Richard taught him? But standing outside that mansion-like house, listening to Vanessa mock a dead man, I realized Richard had seen the possibility long before I did. Somehow he knew. The memory faded as a sharp gust of wind swept across the yard. I looked down at the wooden box. The corners were worn now. The ribbon faded. Time had touched everything. But the lock remained intact, untouched, unopened. For 20 years. My heart pounded. Maybe it was time. Maybe Richard had been right. Maybe this was the moment he prepared for. I walked back to my car. Snow covered the windshield. The parking lot across the street was nearly empty. I sat behind the steering wheel and placed the box carefully in my lap. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. The same box I had protected through moves, through grief, through every chapter of my life. Then slowly, I opened it. Inside was an envelope, a small brass key, and a handwritten letter. My breath caught instantly, because I recognized the handwriting. Richard's. The envelope had only 4 words written across the front. "For Ethan, when he is ready." My hands began to tremble. Not from the cold. From something else. Something I couldn't explain. I carefully opened the letter. The paper crackled softly. The ink had faded slightly over the years. But the first sentence was still perfectly clear. And the moment I read it, the world seemed to stop. Because Richard had written something neither Ethan nor I had ever known. Something that changed everything. Something that explained why he prepared this box in the first place. And suddenly, the brass key resting beside the letter looked far more important than I had ever imagined. But the second page of Richard's letter revealed an even bigger shock. A hidden property, a hidden account, and a secret beneficiary whose name was not Ethan. The moment I read that name, I realized someone had spent 20 years making sure the truth stayed buried. Snow tapped softly against my windshield as I sat frozen in the driver's seat. The letter trembled slightly in my hands. For a long moment, I couldn't continue reading. Not because the words were unclear. Because they were impossible. Richard's handwriting filled the page exactly as I remembered. Strong, steady, certain. The first paragraph was simple. He spoke about family, about character, about the danger of confusing success with worth. It sounded like him. Every sentence carried the same quiet wisdom that had guided our lives together. Then I reached the second page, and everything changed. My eyes stopped on a single line. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, still unable to believe it. Richard had purchased a property 6 months before his death. A property I knew nothing about. A property never mentioned in any conversation. Never listed among our family records. Never discussed with attorneys. Nothing. My pulse quickened. I continued reading. According to the letter, Richard had bought a small piece of land in Wyoming. Not for investment. Not for profit. For a purpose. A purpose he believed might one day matter. Attached to the property was a private account he funded little by little over several years. Not a fortune. But enough to change someone's future. Enough to create opportunities. Enough to help people start over. My heart pounded harder. Why had he hidden it? Why had he never told me? Then I reached the next paragraph. And suddenly I understood. Richard feared exactly what was happening now. He feared that wealth might someday become more important to Ethan than values. He feared that money could distort judgment. That status could replace character. And if that ever happened, the property and funds were never meant to reward it. I swallowed hard. Then my eyes landed on the beneficiary section. The person Richard had chosen. The person who would inherit everything connected to the property. I expected Ethan's name. Maybe mine. Maybe both. Instead, I found a name I hadn't thought about in nearly 15 years. Sarah Mitchell. I stared at the page. Confused. Shocked. Sarah. The young woman Richard and I once helped when she escaped an abusive marriage. Sarah. The frightened mother who arrived at our doorstep carrying a toddler and 2 trash bags full of belongings. Sarah. The woman who spent months rebuilding her life while sleeping in our spare room. I remembered her tears, her gratitude, her determination. Eventually, she moved away. Started over. Built a life. We lost touch. But apparently, Richard never forgot her. Beneath her name, he had written an explanation. 1 sentence. Just one. Yet it revealed everything. She understood kindness when she had nothing. I covered my mouth. Suddenly, I wasn't reading a legal document. I was reading a map of Richard's heart, a record of what mattered most to him. Not blood, not wealth, not appearances. Character, compassion, integrity. The qualities he valued above everything else. Even inheritance. My eyes drifted toward the brass key resting inside the box. Attached to it was a faded paper tag, a location, a town in Wyoming, and a safety deposit box number. I felt a strange mixture of curiosity and dread. What else had Richard hidden? What else didn't I know? Then I noticed something tucked behind the final page. A photograph. Old, slightly bent at the corners. I pulled it free. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. It showed Richard standing beside a small wooden cabin. Snow-covered mountains rose in the distance. The cabin looked modest. Nothing fancy. Nothing valuable at first glance. Yet Richard was smiling. The kind of smile he rarely showed in photographs. A smile full of peace. On the back of the picture, written in blue ink, were 7 words. If everything falls apart, start here. Tears filled my eyes. Because suddenly the cabin wasn't a secret property. It was a refuge. A place he created for second chances. A place he hoped would never be needed. Yet somehow prepared anyway. The realization left me speechless. For 20 years, this piece of Richard's life had remained hidden. Waiting. Patiently. For someone to uncover it. Then my phone rang. The sudden sound startled me. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. I answered. Hello? Several seconds passed. Only silence. Then a woman's voice spoke. Soft. Careful. Nervous. Margaret? My stomach tightened. Yes. Another pause. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I nearly dropped the phone. I think someone has been looking for that box. The world seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? Sarah inhaled shakily. Because 3 days ago, her voice lowered. Someone offered me $50,000 to lie about what happened 20 years ago. Every muscle in my body went rigid. A lie? About what? And more importantly, who was willing to pay that much money to keep the truth hidden? As Sarah began explaining who contacted her, she revealed a name I never expected to hear. Not Vanessa. Not Ethan. But someone far closer to Richard's past. Someone who should have been impossible. Because according to every record we had, that person was supposed to be dead. The snow continued falling outside as I gripped the phone tighter. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear Sarah breathing on the other end. Who contacted you? I asked. There was a long pause. Then she answered. Lydia Carson. The name hit me like a wave. Lydia. Richard's former girlfriend? The woman who had spent years blaming me for the life she never had. The woman everyone believed had died nearly 10 years earlier after moving overseas. I sank back into the driver's seat. That's impossible. I thought so too, Sarah replied quietly. But she contacted me herself. My stomach twisted. Sarah explained that 3 days earlier, a woman claiming to be Lydia had called her. She knew details only Lydia could have known. Private details. Personal memories. Things nobody else remembered. The woman offered Sarah $50,000. In exchange for one thing, silence. Specifically, silence about Richard's hidden property, his private account, and the people connected to it. Why? I whispered. Sarah's answer came immediately. Because she believed everything should have belonged to her family. The puzzle finally came together. Amber. Vanessa. The years of manipulation. The obsession with property. The constant attempts to erase me. None of it had started recently. It had been growing for decades. Fueled by resentment. Fueled by entitlement. Fueled by people who believed they deserved a life Richard never chose. But something unexpected happened next. Sarah laughed softly. I refused. A smile touched my lips. Of course she did. Richard had chosen her for a reason. Character, not convenience. Truth, not profit. The next few weeks moved quickly. Harold helped organize the legal documents. The hidden property was verified. The trust account was real. Everything Richard wrote was true. More importantly, every attempt to challenge it failed. There was no loophole. No mistake. No forgotten clause. Richard had protected his wishes carefully. Meanwhile, Ethan's life began unraveling. Not because of me, because of his own choices. The business contacts he valued so much learned how he treated his family. Several distanced themselves. Vanessa left within a month. The marriage that seemed so perfect from the outside collapsed almost overnight. Apparently, loyalty mattered only when money remained attached to it. And once that disappeared, so did she. One afternoon, several months later, Ethan asked to meet me. Not at the old house. That house no longer belonged to either of us. The women's shelter now operated there. Families rebuilding their lives filled the rooms with laughter again. Exactly as Richard would have wanted. Instead, we met at a small coffee shop. The kind of place Ethan once considered beneath him. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Not because he looked older. Because he looked honest. For the first time in years, he sat quietly across from me. No excuses. No anger. No demands. Just silence. Finally, he spoke. I spent my whole life chasing approval. I listened. He stared into his coffee. I thought success would make me feel secure. His voice cracked slightly, but all it did was make me afraid of losing everything. I didn't interrupt. For the first time, he needed no lecture. Only truth. Tears filled his eyes. I became the kind of person Dad would have been ashamed of. The sentence hung between us. Heavy. Painful. Real. After a long moment, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the wounds disappeared. Because healing begins with honesty. And for the first time in years, honesty had finally arrived. You can't change the past, I said softly. But you can decide who you become next. He nodded. Slowly. Quietly. Like a man hearing something he needed long ago. Months later, I visited Wyoming. Sarah came with me. Together, we found the cabin from Richard's photograph. It stood exactly where he described. Small. Simple. Peaceful. Surrounded by mountains and pine trees. Inside, we found journals. Letters. Photographs. Memories. Nothing worth millions. Nothing anyone would fight over. Just a lifetime of wisdom. A record of a good man's heart. As I sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, I finally understood why Richard had created it. It was never about property. Never about inheritance. Never about wealth. It was about refuge. A place where truth could survive when everything else became complicated. A place that reminded people what actually mattered. That evening, I opened Richard's final journal. The last page contained only one sentence. A sentence written years before his death. A sentence that somehow felt written directly for me. If love costs you your dignity, it is no longer love. I closed the journal and smiled through tears. For years, I thought my greatest achievement was sacrificing everything for the people I loved. I was wrong. My greatest achievement was finally learning that kindness does not require self-destruction. That forgiveness does not require surrender. And that dignity is not something others give you. It is something you choose to keep. As darkness settled over the mountains, I looked toward the cabin lights glowing warmly behind me. For the first time in decades, there were no secrets left. No guilt. No shame. No unfinished battles. Only peace. And peace, I discovered, was worth more than any inheritance. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting revenge on the people who hurt you. It's becoming someone their cruelty can no longer reach. And sometimes, the family you save in the end is yourself.